The room is dark. The only light comes from the flicker of lightning through tall windows and the pale glow of candles struggling against the wind. Outside, rain hammers against the stone walls of Villa Diodati, a grand house perched on the shore of Lake Geneva. Inside, 5 brilliant minds have gathered, trapped by weather that refuses to break. It is June of 1816, but there is no summer. The sky has been dark for months. Across Europe, crops are failing, people are starving. Some are calling it the end of the world. They do not know that on the other side of the globe, a volcano named Tambora has erupted with such violence that it has cast the entire planet into shadow. The world feels apocalyptic. And in this darkness, gathered around a fire that cannot chase away the cold, Lord Byron makes a challenge. "We will each write a ghost story," he declares. It is meant as entertainment, a game to pass the endless, gloomy hours. But one member of the group, the youngest and quietest, will take this challenge and create something that outlives them all. Something that changes literature, science, and philosophy forever. Her name is Mary Godwin. She is 18 years old, and in a few days, she will give birth to the most famous monster in history. But the creature she imagines, 8 feet tall, stitched from corpses, brought to life by unholy science, is not the real monster of her story. The real monster is the man who creates him, the man who looks upon his creation with horror and runs away, the man whose ambition and cowardice doom them both. And perhaps the real monster is something even deeper, something inside all of us. The part that seeks knowledge without wisdom, the part that creates without caring for consequences, the part that Mary Shelley understood better than anyone because she lived it. Before we continue this journey into the heart of darkness, I want to ask you something. If you believe these dark myths, strange histories, and forgotten truths are worth remembering, if you believe the questions raised by a teenage girl 200 years ago still matter today, you can help us continue this work by liking this video and subscribing to the Midnight Archives. Your support keeps the flame burning in the darkness and allows us to explore the shadows where literature, history, and philosophy meet. Tonight, we will open the archive. We will trace Mary Shelley's creation from that stormy night to its place in our modern world, from the tragic life of the young woman who wrote it to the scientific ambitions that made it plausible, from the creature's eloquent rage to the creator's unforgivable cowardice, from Gothic horror to genetic engineering, from reanimated corpses to artificial intelligence. This is not just the story of a monster, it is the story of creation and responsibility, of ambition and abandonment, of the thin line between genius and madness. It is the story of what happens when we play God and then refuse to face what we have made. To understand this story, we must first meet the woman who dreamed it. A woman born into brilliance and tragedy. A woman who understood abandonment and loss before she could write her own name. Welcome to the Midnight Archives. Mary Wollstonecraft. Godwin was born on August 30th, 1797, into a world that expected everything from her and gave her nothing in return. Her mother was Mary Wollstonecraft, one of the most radical and brilliant thinkers of her age. She had written A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, a revolutionary text that argued women were not inferior to men, but were made so by lack of education and opportunity. In an age when women were property, when they could not vote, own land, or even control their own money, Wollstonecraft's words were thunder. She was a philosopher, a rebel, a woman who refused to be tamed by the expectations of her time. Her father was William Godwin, a political philosopher and novelist whose ideas about anarchism, reason, and the perfectibility of man influenced an entire generation. He believed that humanity could be saved through education and rational thought, that the chains of tyranny and superstition could be broken by the light of reason. Together, they were two of the most famous intellectuals in England. Their union was a scandal. They had lived together before marriage, defying convention. But it was also a partnership of minds. They represented the future, the hope that reason and equality might one day triumph. Mary was born from this union of brilliance. She was meant to be proof that women, given opportunity, could achieve anything. But Mary Wollstonecraft never saw her daughter grow up. 11 days after giving birth, she died from an infection. Puerperal fever, they called it, a common killer of mothers in that age. Her death was agonizing. For days she suffered, her body racked with fever, while the best doctors in London stood helpless. William Godwin sat by her bedside, watching the light fade from the woman he loved. And when she finally died, he was left with a daughter he did not know how to raise, and a grief he did not know how to bear. Mary grew up in the shadow of her mother's ghost. Her father remarried quickly, not for love, but for practicality. He needed someone to manage the household, to care for his children. The woman he chose, Mary Jane Clairmont, was neither kind nor nurturing. She had children of her own from a previous marriage, and she made it clear that they came first. Mary, the brilliant child of a brilliant mother, was treated as an inconvenience. Her father, once warm and engaged, retreated into his work. He had loved her mother so deeply that he could not bear to look at the daughter who reminded him of what he had lost. He became cold, distant, more interested in his philosophical debates and his struggling publishing business than in the lonely child who haunted his library. And so, Mary grew up alone. She was surrounded by people, her stepmother, her step-siblings, the constant parade of radical thinkers and poets who came to her father's home. But she was isolated in a way that only the brilliant and lonely can understand. She found her only solace in her mother's grave. There was a small cemetery near their home, St. Pancras churchyard. Mary Wollstonecraft was buried there, beneath a simple stone that bore her name, and it was there, sitting on the grass beside her mother's grave, that young Mary would come to read. She would bring books from her father's library, philosophy, science, poetry, and she would read them aloud, as though her mother could still hear her, as though in that quiet place between the living and the dead, she might find the connection she lacked in the world above. In this way, Mary's education was both extraordinary and tragic. She was surrounded by brilliance, but starved for affection. She had access to ideas that most women of her time could never touch, but no one to guide her through them. She learned philosophy, science, and literature not in a classroom, but in a graveyard, speaking to a ghost. She was being prepared, though she did not know it yet, to understand something that would terrify and fascinate the world. She was learning what it means to be abandoned by the ones who create you. Mary's childhood was a strange contradiction. She lived in poverty, but was surrounded by the finest minds in England. Her father's publishing business was always on the edge of bankruptcy, yet their home in Somerstown was a gathering place for poets, philosophers, and radicals. Samuel Taylor Coleridge would visit, reciting the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner in their parlour, his voice filling the room with visions of death and the supernatural. Mary, just a girl, would hide behind the sofa, listening to every word. She absorbed the rhythms of Gothic horror, the power of guilt and isolation, long before she could name them. Charles Lamb came with his sister Mary, both brilliant and haunted by tragedy. William Hazlitt, the essayist, would argue politics and philosophy late into the night. Percy Bysshe Shelley, the young radical poet, would eventually walk through those doors and change Mary's life forever. For most children, this would have been overwhelming, but for Mary, it was oxygen. She was not invited to join the conversations. She was a girl, after all, expected to be seen and not heard. But she listened, she absorbed. She read everything in her father's library: Milton's Paradise Lost, Plutarch's Lives, Rousseau's Confessions, her mother's revolutionary writings. She was particularly drawn to science. This was the age of discovery, when electricity was still mysterious, when the boundaries between life and death seemed less certain than they do now. She read about galvanism, the idea that electricity could animate dead tissue. She read about spontaneous generation, the belief that life could arise from non-living matter. She read about alchemy and chemistry, about the search for the spark of life itself. These were not just ideas to her, they were possibilities, questions waiting to be answered. But beneath all this brilliance was a deep loneliness. Mary was too intelligent for ordinary company. The other children her age could not understand her. She spoke of philosophy and science while they spoke of parties and gossip. She asked questions about death and consciousness while they worried about marriage prospects. And yet, she was too young to be taken seriously by the adults around her. The brilliant men who visited her father's home would pat her on the head and send her away. She was William Godwin's daughter, the child of Mary Wollstonecraft, but she was not yet seen as a thinker in her own right. She existed in a strange liminal space, too brilliant for childhood, too young for adulthood, a mind without a place to belong. The weight of expectation was crushing. She was the daughter of two intellectual giants. Her mother had fought for the rights of women. Her father had argued for the perfectibility of mankind. What was she supposed to do? How could she possibly live up to that legacy? The question haunted her, and in her isolation, she began to dream. Dreams of creation, of bringing something new into the world, of proving that she was worthy of the name she carried. But she also dreamed of something darker, of abandonment, of being cast aside by the ones who should have loved her, of creating something beautiful and having it rejected. These dreams, born in her lonely childhood, would one day become the foundation of the most famous horror story ever written. Mary was 16 when she met Percy Bysshe Shelley. He came to her father's home in 1814, a young poet with wild eyes and wilder ideas. He was 21, married, and utterly brilliant. He had been expelled from Oxford for publishing a pamphlet on atheism. He had scandalized London with his radical politics. He believed in free love, in the abolition of marriage, in revolution. He was everything the respectable world feared. And Mary fell in love with him immediately. Their courtship was conducted in secret, in the one place where Mary felt most at home, her mother's grave. They would meet at St. Pancras churchyard, sitting beside the tombstone of Mary Wollstonecraft, and they would talk for hours. Percy would read his poetry to her. Mary would share her own writing, tentative and hopeful. They would discuss philosophy, science, and the nature of love. It was there, beside her mother's grave, that Percy first kissed her. It was there that they declared their love for each other, as though Mary Wollstonecraft herself was blessing their union. But the world outside the graveyard was not so kind. Percy was married. His wife, Harriet, was pregnant with their second child. William Godwin, who had written so eloquently about free love and the tyranny of marriage, was horrified when his own daughter became involved in such a scandal. He forbade Mary from seeing Percy. He threatened to disown her. But Mary had lived her entire life trying to please a father who could never be pleased. For once, she chose herself. In July of 1814, Mary and Percy ran away together. They fled to France, taking with them Mary's stepsister, Claire Clairmont. They had almost no money, no plan, and no idea what they would do. They were exiles, outcasts, young and in love, and utterly reckless. For Mary, it felt like freedom. For the first time in her life, she was not alone. She had someone who saw her not as William Godwin's daughter, but as Mary, brilliant, passionate, and worthy of love. But freedom has a price. They wandered across Europe, moving from city to city, always short on money, always running from scandal. They lived on Percy's small allowance and whatever money they could borrow. They were shunned by polite society. Letters from England brought news of her father's rage, of Percy's abandoned wife, of debts and disasters. And then, in February of 1815, Mary gave birth to her first child, a daughter, born 2 months premature. She lived for only 11 days. Mary, just 17 years old, held her dying baby in her arms and felt a grief she could not name. She had created life, and life had been taken from her before she could even know it. The baby was never christened, never given a name. She existed, and then she did not, like a dream that fades upon waking. In her journal, Mary wrote, "Dream that my little baby came to life again, that it had only been cold, and that we rubbed it before the fire, and it lived. It was a dream she would never stop having, a dream of bringing the dead back to life, of warming cold flesh until it moved again, of undoing death itself. This loss, this unbearable grief, planted a seed in Mary's mind, a seed that would one day grow into a creature 8 feet tall, assembled from the dead and brought to life by electricity and ambition. But for now, she simply mourned. Percy tried to comfort her, but he was restless, always moving, always writing, always chasing new ideas. He loved Mary, but he did not know how to sit with grief. And so, Mary carried her sorrow alone, just as she had carried everything else in her life. They moved on. Another city, another temporary home. In January of 1816, Mary gave birth again, a son they named William, after her father. This time, the child lived, but the shadow of the first baby never left her. By the spring of 1816, Percy suggested they leave England entirely. Claire Clairmont had become involved with Lord Byron, the most famous and scandalous poet in Europe, and she was determined to follow him to Switzerland. Percy, always eager for adventure, convinced Mary to join them. And so, in May of 1816, they set out for Lake Geneva. None of them could have known what awaited them. Not just a summer by the lake, but a summer unlike any other in human history. A summer when the sun itself would abandon the earth. As their carriage rolled through France toward the Swiss border, the sky began to darken. Not the darkness of evening, but something else. Something wrong. The air grew cold. The crops in the fields stood brown and withered, though it should have been the height of spring. Farmers stared at the sky with hollow eyes. Children huddled in doorways. Priests spoke of the end of days. Mary looked out the window of the carriage and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. The world was dying, and they were riding straight into the heart of the darkness. What Mary did not know, what no one in Europe knew, was that the world had already ended. 6,000 miles away, a mountain had exploded with the force of 1,000 atomic bombs, and the ash from that explosion was now circling the globe, choking out the sun. The year, without a summer, had begun, and in that unnatural darkness, Mary Shelley would dream of a creature brought to life in the dead of night, a creature assembled from corpses and animated by lightning. The storm was coming, and it would never truly end. On April 10th, 1815, something happened that would change the world. A volcano named Mount Tambora, located on a remote island in the Dutch East Indies, began to rumble. For days, the tremors grew stronger. The local population fled into the hills, praying to their gods for mercy. And then, on the evening of April 10th, the mountain exploded. The eruption was so violent that it could be heard over 1,000 miles away. Sailors in the Java Sea thought they were hearing cannon fire from a distant naval battle and prepared for combat. In reality, they were hearing the death scream of a mountain. The explosion blasted 12 cubic miles of rock, ash, and magma into the atmosphere. The eruption column rose 28 miles into the sky, higher than any passenger jet flies today. The ash cloud was so massive that it blocked out the sun across an entire hemisphere. 71,000 people died immediately, buried in pyroclastic flows, drowned in tsunamis, or crushed by falling debris. But the real death toll was yet to come. The ash began to spread. It circled the globe in the upper atmosphere, forming a veil between the Earth and the sun. Temperatures dropped worldwide, and in 1816, summer never came. Europe descended into nightmare. In England, snow fell in June. Frost killed the wheat in July. By August, food riots had begun in the streets of London. Mothers watched their children starve. Farmers burned their fields and fled to the cities, hoping for work that did not exist. In France and Germany, the devastation was even worse. The harvests failed completely. Bread prices soared beyond what anyone could afford. Desperate families ate grass, tree bark, and rats. Some turned to cannibalism, though no one spoke of it openly. Typhus and cholera swept through the weakened population. Tens of thousands died, their bodies buried in mass graves. The survivors wandered like ghosts through a world that had gone grey and cold. In Ireland, the potato crop failed, a grim preview of the famine that would devastate the island 30 years later. In North America, snow fell in July from New England to Quebec. Crops froze in the fields. Livestock died by the thousands. the world was ending, and no one knew why. They did not know about Tambora. They did not understand volcanoes or atmospheric science. They only knew that God, or the devil, had turned his face away from humanity, that the sun had been stolen, that winter had come in summer and would not leave. Preachers declared it was the apocalypse. Scientists had no answers, and ordinary people simply tried to survive, day by cold, dark day. But in Switzerland, on the shores of Lake Geneva, in a grand villa overlooking grey water and darker mountains, 5 brilliant young minds were about to turn that darkness into something that would outlive them all. They did not know they were making history. They thought they were just telling ghost stories to pass the time. They were wrong. The storm was here, and from its lightning, a monster would be born. Villa Diodati sat on the shore of Lake Geneva, a grand stone house with tall windows that looked out over grey water and darker mountains. It had once been a place of beauty, but in the summer of 1816, it felt more like a prison. Lord Byron had rented the villa as a refuge from scandal. At only 28 years old, he was already the most famous poet in Europe, and the most notorious. He had been exiled from England after rumours spread of an incestuous relationship with his half-sister Augusta. He had abandoned his wife and infant daughter. He was accused of sodomy, of atheism, of every sin that polite society could name. But he was also undeniably brilliant. His poetry was dark, passionate, and dangerous. He was the embodiment of the romantic ideal, the tortured genius, the beautiful rebel, the man who refused to be tamed. Byron arrived at Villa Diodati with his physician, John Polidori, a young man eager to prove himself as a writer. Polidori was nervous, ambitious, and deeply insecure. He worshipped Byron and resented him in equal measure, desperate for recognition, but always standing in the poet's shadow. Across the lake, in a smaller house, Percy Shelley and Mary Godwin had taken up residence, along with Claire Claremont. Claire had pursued Byron relentlessly and was now pregnant with his child, a fact that embarrassed Byron and created tension within the group. Percy Shelley was 23, a radical poet and philosopher who had been expelled from Oxford for atheism and exiled from polite society for his beliefs in free love and revolution. He was brilliant, restless, and utterly fearless in his ideas. He and Byron formed an immediate bond, 2 outcasts who recognized themselves in each other. Mary was the youngest of the group at 18. She was also the quietest. While the men dominated the conversations, debating philosophy and science late into the night, Mary sat and listened. She was brilliant, but she was not yet confident in her own voice. She was Percy's partner, William Godwin's daughter, Mary Wollstonecraft's legacy, but she was not yet herself. The group spent their days trapped indoors by the relentless rain. They read ghost stories aloud, tales of haunted castles and vengeful spirits. They discussed philosophy, science, and the nature of life itself. They drank wine and argued and laughed, their voices echoing through the dark halls of the villa. But beneath the surface, there was restlessness, a hunger for something more. It was Byron who made the challenge. One night, as lightning flickered across the lake and thunder shook the windows, he stood before the fire and declared, "We will each write a ghost story." It was meant as entertainment, a game to pass the endless dark hours. But it was also a challenge to his companions, all of whom fancied themselves writers. Who among them could create something truly terrifying? Who could capture the Gothic horror that surrounded them and put it on the page? Byron began immediately, scribbling the opening of a vampire tale. Percy started something but soon lost interest, his mind already moving on to other ideas. Polidori, desperate to impress, worked furiously on what would eventually become The Vampire, the first modern vampire story. But Mary struggled. For days, she thought about the challenge. She wanted to write something worthy, something that would prove she was not just Percy's companion or her father's daughter, but a writer in her own right. But every idea she considered felt small, insignificant. The stories the others were writing were entertaining, but they were not original. They were echoes of the Gothic tales they had been reading. Mary wanted something new, something that had never been written before. But the blank page remained empty. She listened to the conversations that swirled around her. Byron and Percy debated the nature of life. Could it be created? Could science unlock the secrets of vitality? They discussed the experiments of Erasmus Darwin, who had claimed to observe primitive organisms spontaneously generating in a jar. They talked about galvanism, the use of electricity to stimulate dead tissue. One night, Percy and Byron debated whether a corpse could be reanimated, whether the principle of life could be discovered and harnessed. It was a thrilling, terrifying idea. If life was simply a spark, an electrical charge, then in theory, death could be reversed. The dead could be brought back. Mary listened, and as she listened, an idea began to form. But it was not fully realized until one night, after a particularly intense conversation, when she went to bed and could not sleep. She lay in the darkness, her mind racing, and then, between waking and dreaming, she saw it. I saw the pale student of unhallowed arts kneeling beside the thing he had put together. I saw the hideous phantasm of a man stretched out, and then, on the working of some powerful engine, show signs of life and stir with an uneasy, half-vital motion. She saw the creature's dull yellow eye open. She saw the student flee in horror from his own creation. She saw the monster, abandoned and alone, left to face the world without guidance or love. Mary opened her eyes. Her heart was pounding. She had found her story. The next morning, she began to write. It was on a dreary night of November that I beheld the accomplishment of my toils. But the creature Mary imagined was not the true horror of her tale. The real monster was not the 8-foot giant stitched from corpses and brought to life by electricity. The real monster was the man who created him, the man who looked upon his creation, his own child in a sense, and fled in revulsion. The man whose ambition drove him to play God, but whose cowardice prevented him from taking responsibility for what he had made. Victor Frankenstein. And to understand him, we must enter the mind of obsession itself. Victor Frankenstein is not a mad scientist. That is the first thing we must understand. He is not cackling in a laboratory, surrounded by bubbling beakers and crackling electricity. He is not evil. He is brilliant. He is driven, and he is consumed by grief. In Mary Shelley's novel, Victor is born into a loving, wealthy family in Geneva. His childhood is idyllic. He has doting parents, a beloved younger brother named William, and an adopted sister, Elizabeth, who is also his closest companion and eventual fiancée. His life is secure, comfortable, and full of promise. But when Victor is 17 years old, his mother dies. She falls ill with scarlet fever while nursing Elizabeth back to health. The disease takes her quickly. One moment she is alive, caring for her family. The next, she is gone. Victor watches helplessly as the woman who gave him life slips away, and there is nothing he can do to stop it. This loss is the wound that drives everything. Victor does not accept death. He cannot. The idea that someone he loves could simply cease to exist, that all her warmth and life and love could vanish into nothingness, is unbearable. He becomes obsessed with a single question. What if death could be conquered? This is not the question of a madman. It is the question of someone in grief who refuses to accept the limits of the world. It is a question many of us have asked, standing beside a grave, wishing desperately that we could bring back the ones we love. But Victor does not simply wish. He acts. He leaves for university at Ingolstadt, in Germany, determined to study natural philosophy, what we would today call science. He immerses himself in chemistry, anatomy, and physiology. He reads the ancient alchemists, Paracelsus, Cornelius Agrippa, Albertus Magnus. He learns about galvanism, the mysterious force that causes muscles to twitch when exposed to electricity. And slowly, an idea begins to form. What if life was not a mystery, but a mechanism? What if death was not the end, but simply a problem to be solved? What if he could discover the principle of life itself, the spark that animates flesh, and use it to create life where there was none? It is a seductive idea, and for Victor, it becomes an obsession. To understand Victor Frankenstein's ambition, we must understand the science of Mary Shelley's time. Because what Victor attempts was not pure fantasy. It was, in 1818, on the bleeding edge of plausibility. The late 18th and early 19th centuries were a time of extraordinary scientific discovery. The boundaries between magic and science, between the impossible and the merely difficult, were not yet firmly established. Electricity was still mysterious. Chemistry was still in its infancy. And the question of what separated life from death was still open. In 1780, an Italian scientist named Luigi Galvani made a shocking discovery. While dissecting a frog, he noticed that when he touched its leg with a metal scalpel, the muscles would twitch. Even though the frog was dead, the electricity stored in the metal was causing its muscles to move. Galvani believed he had discovered something profound: animal electricity, a vital force that animated living tissue. If electricity could make a dead frog's leg kick, what else could it do? His nephew, Giovanni Aldini, took the experiments further. In 1803, Aldini performed a public demonstration in London that shocked the city. He obtained the corpse of a hanged murderer and applied electrical current to it. The body's jaw began to move, its eyes opened, one hand clenched into a fist as though reaching for something. Witnesses were horrified and fascinated in equal measure. It looked, for all the world, as though the dead man was coming back to life. This was not magic. This was science. And it raised a terrifying question. If electricity could make a corpse move, could it bring it fully back to life? Victor Frankenstein, in Mary Shelley's novel, is obsessed with this question. He studies galvanism, anatomy, and chemistry. He reads the old alchemists, who believed that life could be created in the laboratory through the right combination of elements. He becomes convinced that life is not divine, but material, that it can be understood, replicated and controlled. And so, he makes his decision. He will create life, not through natural reproduction, but through science. He will build a human being from scratch and give it the spark of life. But to do this, he needs raw materials. Victor's laboratory is not a gleaming hall of science. It is a filthy, cramped room at the top of his lodgings, lit by a single candle. The windows are covered to block out prying eyes. The air smells of chemicals and rot. He works alone, in secret. He tells no one what he is doing. Not his professors, not his friends, not his family. He cuts himself off completely from the world, consumed by his project. And the work is horrifying. To build his creature, Victor needs bodies. He haunts graveyards at night, digging up the recently dead. He visits charnel houses and slaughterhouses, collecting bones, organs, and tissue. He selects the best pieces, the strongest and most perfect, assembling them like an artist creating a sculpture. But this is not art. It is dissection. It is desecration. Victor is surrounded by death every day, his hands stained with grave dirt and blood, his mind focused only on the moment of creation. In the novel, Mary Shelley does not describe the exact process Victor uses. She leaves it vague, shrouded in shadow. But she makes one thing clear: Victor is not enjoying this work. He is not reveling in his transgression. He is pushing himself past the limits of endurance, driven by an obsession he can no longer control. He stops sleeping. He stops eating. His health deteriorates. His friends write to him, worried, but he does not reply. He is no longer a student, no longer a son, no longer even fully human. He is a creature of ambition, consumed by the need to finish what he has started. Months pass. The work continues. And finally, on a dreary night in November, Victor Frankenstein completes his task. The creature is assembled. 8 feet tall, its body a patchwork of the finest pieces Victor could find. Its skin is yellow and translucent, stretched tight over muscle and bone. Its hair is long and black. Its teeth are white and perfect. In Victor's mind, it is beautiful. It is the pinnacle of his art and science. It is proof that death can be conquered, that life can be created through knowledge and will. He attaches the electrodes. He activates the machine. The electricity surges through the creature's body, and then the creature's dull yellow eye opens. Victor has succeeded. He has created life. But as he looks down at his creation, still twitching on the table, still adjusting to the shock of existence, Victor feels something he did not expect. Not pride, not joy, not triumph, horror. The creature that looked beautiful in pieces is hideous when assembled. Its yellow skin does not hide the workings beneath, but makes them visible. Its eyes, watery and unfocused, stare at Victor with something that looks almost like pleading. Its lips, black and uneven, move as though trying to form words. Victor looks at his creation, his child, in a sense, and feels only revulsion. He has spent months, perhaps years, working toward this moment. He has sacrificed his health, his relationships, his sanity. He has desecrated graves and defied God and nature. And now, faced with the result, he cannot bear to look at it. Victor Frankenstein does what no parent should ever do. He runs away. He flees from his laboratory, stumbling down the stairs and out into the cold November night. He wanders the streets of Ingolstadt, trembling, sick with horror at what he has done. He does not return to check on the creature. He does not try to communicate with it, to teach it, to care for it. He simply abandons it. And in that moment of cowardice, Victor Frankenstein becomes the true monster of Mary Shelley's tale. Because the creature he has made is not evil. It is not a demon. It is an infant, newly born into the world, with no understanding of what it is or where it came from. It is alone, confused, and terrified, and its creator, the one person in the world who should have cared for it, has fled. The creature was abandoned, but it was not helpless. It could move, it could feel, it could think. And in the cold, dark streets of Ingolstadt, as Victor Frankenstein hid from his own creation, the creature took its first steps into the world. It did not yet know what it was. It did not yet understand that it was hated, but it would learn. And that education would be the most tragic part of Mary Shelley's story. Imagine waking up for the first time, not waking up from sleep, but waking up into existence itself. No memories, no language, no understanding of what you are or where you came from. Only sensation. This is the creature's first experience of life. Light, too bright, burning his eyes. Cold, biting into skin that has never felt temperature before. Sound, overwhelming, meaningless noise crashing into ears that have never heard. His body is too large, unfamiliar. When he tries to move, his limbs do not obey. He falls, crashes, struggles, and he is alone. The laboratory is empty. The creator who gave him life has fled. There is no one to explain what is happening, no one to guide him, no one to tell him that what he is feeling is normal, that it will pass, that he will learn. For hours, perhaps days, the creature remains in that room, slowly learning the most basic functions of existence. How to move without falling, how to see without being blinded, how to distinguish one sound from another. And then, driven by instincts he does not understand, he leaves the laboratory. He stumbles out into the streets of Ingolstadt. It is night. The city is dark. He does not know where he is going. He only knows that he must move, must find something, though he does not yet have words for what he needs. The first human beings he encounters flee from him in terror. A woman sees him in the street and screams. A man tries to strike him with a stick. Children throw stones. He does not understand why. He has done nothing to them. He has not spoken, has not threatened, but their fear is instinctive and absolute. The creature flees the city, driven by confusion and pain, and finds himself in the wilderness. Here, for the first time, he is alone in a way that does not hurt. The trees do not scream at him. The animals do not throw stones. The moon and stars, though cold and distant, do not run away. He begins to learn. He discovers fire, first terrified of it, then fascinated, then grateful for its warmth. He learns that certain plants are food, that water quenches thirst, that shelter protects from the cold. He is like an animal, surviving on instinct. But he is not an animal. He is something else, something more. He is intelligent. He observes. He remembers. He begins to form ideas, though he does not yet have language to express them. And slowly, painfully, the creature begins to understand that he is different, that he is not like the other beings he occasionally glimpses from a distance. He is larger, stranger, alone in a way that no other creature seems to be. He does not yet know that he is hated, but he is beginning to feel that he does not belong. The creature's real education begins when he discovers the cottage. Wandering through the forests of Germany, he comes upon a small, humble dwelling. Through a crack in the wall, he can see inside. A family lives there. An old man, blind and gentle. A young man, strong and kind. A young woman, beautiful and sad. They are poor. Their meals are meager. Their clothes are worn. But they love each other. The creature watches as they speak softly to one another, as they share their bread, as they sit together by the fire. He has never seen anything like this. He has never witnessed kindness, affection, family, and something in him responds to it with desperate longing. He begins to live in a lean-to attached to their cottage, a small space where he can observe them through the crack in the wall. He watches them every day, and in watching them, he begins to learn. He learns language. At first, the sounds they make are meaningless, but slowly, through observation, he begins to connect words to objects, words to actions, words to emotions. Fire, bread, father, love. He learns to speak by listening, to read by watching the young man teach his sister, to think by following their conversations. But he learns more than language. He learns about the world beyond the cottage. The young man reads aloud from books, and the creature absorbs every word. He learns history from Plutarch's Lives, tales of great men and their deeds. He learns about society, about nations and laws and hierarchies. He finds 3 books discarded near the cottage, and he reads them obsessively. Paradise Lost by John Milton. The story of Satan's fall from heaven, of Adam and Eve's exile from paradise. The creature sees himself in these pages. Is he Adam, the first creation, innocent and abandoned? Or is he Satan, cast out and filled with rage? The Sorrows of Young Werther by Goethe. A tale of a young man destroyed by impossible love and crushing isolation. The creature understands this pain intimately. He too feels the weight of loneliness, the longing for connection that can never be fulfilled. And finally, most devastating of all, he finds Victor Frankenstein's journal, the one his creator left behind in the laboratory, detailing every step of the creature's creation. The creature reads his own origin story. He learns that he was not born, but built, that he was assembled from corpses stolen from graves, that his creator looked upon him with horror and fled. He learns that he is not a person. He is an experiment, a mistake. This knowledge breaks something in him. He had begun to hope that he might have a place in the world, that he might be like the humans he observed. But now he understands the truth. He is an abomination. He is alone, not by accident, but by design. He was created and then rejected, brought into existence only to be cast aside. And yet, despite this knowledge, despite the crushing weight of his isolation, the creature still hopes. He decides to reveal himself to the De Lacy family. If they can know him, if they can see past his appearance and understand his mind and his heart, perhaps they will accept him. Perhaps he will finally have the family he has been watching through the crack in the wall. He waits for the right moment. One day, when the young man and woman are away, he approaches the cottage. Only the blind father is home. The creature enters and speaks. The old man cannot see him, and so, for the first time in his existence, the creature is judged not by his appearance, but by his words. He speaks carefully, respectfully. He explains that he is a traveler, alone and friendless, seeking kindness. The old man listens. He is gentle. He offers comfort. He says that he and his family will help, that no one should be alone in the world. For a moment, the creature knows joy. For a moment, he believes he has found a home, and then the door opens. The young man and woman return. They see the creature, 8 feet tall, hideous, monstrous, standing beside their blind father. They do not hear his words. They do not see his desperate hope. They see only a monster. The young woman screams and faints. The young man seizes a stick and strikes the creature, driving him away from the old man, shouting for him to leave. The creature could easily overpower them. He is stronger than any human, but he does not fight back. He only flees, his heart breaking. He runs into the forest, and he does not stop running until he collapses, sobbing, alone. In that moment, everything changes. The creature had been innocent. He had sought only love, only connection. He had learned language and philosophy and history, had tried to be good, had hoped that goodness would be enough. But it was not. His appearance damned him. No matter what he said, no matter what he did, he would always be seen as a monster. And if the world would only see him as a monster, then perhaps that is what he would become. The creature's rage is born not from evil, but from grief. He has been rejected not once, but repeatedly, by his creator, by every human who has seen him, by the family he loved from a distance. He understands now that he will never have what they have. He will never sit by a fire with people who love him. He will never be called by a name. He will never be anything but what Victor Frankenstein made him, a thing to be feared and hated. And so, he makes a decision. If he cannot have love, he will have revenge. He will find his creator. He will make Victor Frankenstein understand the pain of being abandoned. He will take from Victor everything that Victor took from him. He will make him suffer. The creature rises from the forest floor. His innocence is gone. His hope is dead. And in its place is something cold and terrible. Purpose. The creature begins his journey toward Geneva, toward Victor Frankenstein's home. He does not yet know what he will do when he arrives. He knows only that his creator must answer for what he has done, that the man who gave him life and then abandoned him must face the consequences. But along the way, the creature's rage will overflow, and an innocent child will pay the price. The creature's journey to Geneva takes months. He travels at night, hiding during the day, avoiding human contact. His mind is consumed with thoughts of Victor Frankenstein, of revenge, of making his creator understand what it means to be abandoned. But his rage is unstable. It does not wait patiently for its target. It seeks release. Near Geneva, the creature encounters a child playing alone in the woods. A boy, no more than 5 or 6 years old, with golden curls and innocent eyes. The creature approaches him, thinking perhaps that a child too young to have learned to hate, might see him differently. But the child screams. He tries to run. The creature grabs him, trying to calm him, trying to explain. But the boy fights, kicking and screaming, shouting words that cut deeper than any blow. "Monster! Ugly wretch! Let me go, or I'll tell my father. My father is Monsieur Frankenstein." The creature freezes. Frankenstein. This child is Victor's brother. In that moment, all the rage, all the grief, all the pain of his existence focuses into a single point. This child represents everything the creature has been denied: family, love, innocence. This child will grow up with everything: warmth, affection, a name, while the creature has nothing. The creature's hands tighten around the boy's throat. It is over in seconds. William Frankenstein dies, his neck snapped, his small body limp. The creature looks down at what he has done and feels something new, not remorse, but a terrible satisfaction. He has hurt Victor. He has taken something precious from his creator. Now, Victor will know what it feels like to lose. But the creature is not finished. He looks down and sees a locket around the boy's neck, a miniature portrait inside. He takes it, and then, with cold calculation, he plants it in the pocket of a young woman who is sleeping nearby, a servant from the Frankenstein household. Her name is Justine Moritz. She is innocent, kind, and has done nothing wrong. But the creature knows she will be blamed. He wants Victor to suffer completely, not just the loss of his brother, but the injustice of an innocent person being punished for a crime they did not commit. And he is right. Justine is found with the locket. She is arrested, tried, and convicted of William's murder. Victor knows she is innocent. He knows who really killed his brother, but he does not speak. To reveal the truth would mean revealing the creature's existence. It would mean admitting what he has done, confessing to his own unnatural experiments. And Victor, in his cowardice, cannot do it. He watches in silence as Justine is executed for a crime she did not commit. 2 innocent people are now dead because of Victor Frankenstein's actions. One by the creature's hands, one by Victor's silence, and the creature is watching. After Justine's execution, Victor is consumed by guilt. He flees Geneva, seeking solitude in the mountains, hoping that the vast, cold beauty of the Alps will give him some measure of peace. But peace does not come. Instead, as he climbs a glacier, he sees a figure approaching through the ice and mist. A figure too large to be human, moving with impossible speed across the frozen wasteland. It is the creature. They meet on a glacier, creator and creation, face to face for the first time since the night of the creature's birth. Victor's first instinct is rage. He curses the creature, calls him devil and monster, threatens to destroy him. But the creature does not attack. Instead, he speaks. And what follows is one of the most powerful and heartbreaking sections of Mary Shelley's novel. The creature is eloquent. He speaks with the language of philosophers and poets. He is not a mindless beast, but an intelligent, suffering being. And he forces Victor to listen to his story. He describes his awakening, his confusion, his pain. He describes learning language and philosophy, watching the DeLacy family, reading Paradise Lost. He describes the moment when he tried to reach out to humans and was met with violence and rejection. He says, "I am malicious because I am miserable. Am I not shunned and hated by all mankind? You, my creator, would tear me to pieces and triumph. Remember that, and tell me why I should pity man more than he pities me." He explains that he did not choose to be created. He did not ask for existence. He was brought into the world against his will and then abandoned. Every act of cruelty he has committed has been in response to cruelty done to him. And then the creature makes a demand. He wants Victor to create a companion for him, a female creature, made as he was made, who will not judge him by his appearance, someone who will understand him, who will not flee from him, who will ease the unbearable loneliness of his existence. If Victor does this, the creature promises, he and his mate will leave Europe forever. They will go to the wilds of South America, far from human civilization, and live out their days in peace. Victor will never see them again. The murders will stop. But if Victor refuses, the creature warns, the killing will continue. He will hunt down everyone Victor loves. He will make Victor's life a mirror of his own, isolated, grieving, destroyed. Victor is trapped. He does not want to create another monster. He does not want to unleash another creature into the world, but he also cannot bear the thought of more innocent deaths. After days of anguish, he agrees. He will create a mate for the creature. Victor returns to his laboratory, but this time the work is different. Before, he was driven by ambition and the intoxication of discovery. Now, he is driven by obligation and fear. There is no joy in this creation, only dread. He works in secret on a remote island in Scotland, far from his family and friends. He assembles the female creature piece by piece, using the same methods he used for the first. The work is slower, more painstaking. He cannot escape the knowledge of what he is doing, but as the work progresses, doubts begin to gnaw at him. What if the creatures refuse to leave Europe? What if they stay and continue to kill? What if they reproduce? What if he is creating not one new species, but a race of monsters that will replace humanity? And what if the female creature, upon being brought to life, rejects her mate just as the world rejected him? What if she finds him as hideous as everyone else does? Victor realizes that he cannot guarantee the creature's happiness. He can only create another suffering being. One night, as he works by candlelight, Victor looks up and sees the creature watching him through the window. The creature is smiling, a look of desperate hope on his face. He is counting the days until his companion is complete, until he will finally have what every living thing desires, someone who understands him. And in that moment, Victor makes his decision. He cannot do it. He cannot create another monster. The risks are too great. The consequences too terrible. He tears the female creature apart. He rips her to pieces before she can ever open her eyes, destroying months of work in a matter of seconds. The creature sees everything. His howl of rage and grief echoes across the island. He crashes through the window, his face contorted with fury and heartbreak. He looks at the destroyed remains of his would-be companion, then at Victor, and he makes a promise. "I will be with you on your wedding night." Victor does not understand. He thinks the creature is threatening him, promising to kill him on the night of his wedding to Elizabeth. He prepares himself for his own death, determined to protect Elizabeth from the creature. But the creature does not mean Victor. He means Elizabeth. He will take from Victor what Victor has taken from him, the possibility of love. Victor marries Elizabeth. The wedding is beautiful, full of joy and hope. Elizabeth is radiant. Victor's father is proud. For a moment, it seems as though Victor might escape his past, might have a chance at happiness despite everything he has done. But Victor knows the creature's promise. He knows the threat is real. On their wedding night, he sends Elizabeth to their room while he prowls the house with a pistol, searching for the creature, determined to face him. He searches every room, every shadow. He hears nothing, sees nothing. Minutes pass, then an hour. He begins to wonder if the creature was lying, if the threat was empty. And then he hears a scream. Victor runs to the bedroom. The door is open. The wind from the lake is blowing the curtains. And on the bed lies Elizabeth, her neck broken, her eyes staring at nothing. The creature appears at the window just for a moment and locks eyes with Victor. And on his face is not triumph, but grief. The creature has become what the world made him: a killer, a destroyer. Victor collapses beside Elizabeth's body, screaming. Everything he loved is gone. His mother, his brother, his friend, and now his wife. The creature has kept his promise. He has made Victor understand what it means to be utterly, completely alone. But Victor does not break. His grief transforms into something else: rage. A rage that matches the creature's own. A determination not just to kill the creature, but to hunt him to the ends of the earth. Victor Frankenstein becomes what the creature already is: a being consumed by vengeance, willing to sacrifice everything in pursuit of his enemy. The chase begins. Creator pursuing creation. Monster hunting monster. And it will not end until one of them is dead. But the real horror of Mary Shelley's tale was not on the page. It was in her own life. Because the tragedies she wrote about were not fiction. They were prophecy. Mary Shelley finished writing Frankenstein in the spring of 1817. She was 19 years old. The novel was published anonymously in January of 1818, with a preface written by Percy Shelley that led many readers to assume he was the author. The book was met with mixed reviews. Some praised its imagination and power. Others were horrified by its dark themes and blasphemous ideas. But it found an audience. It was read and discussed and debated. Mary Shelley, though her name was not on the cover, had created something that would outlive her. But the years that followed were not kind. In September of 1818, Clara, Mary's 1-year-old daughter, died suddenly. The child had been sick during a difficult journey, and Mary had begged Percy to stop so the baby could rest. But Percy insisted they press on. By the time they reached Venice, Clara was dead. Mary blamed Percy. She blamed herself. The grief was crushing, compounded by the memory of her first daughter, who had died in her arms 3 years earlier. Then, in June of 1819, 3-year-old William, the son Mary had named after her father, died of malaria. He was a bright, happy child, the light of Mary's life. His death shattered her. In the space of less than a year, Mary lost 2 children. She was 22 years old, and she had now buried 3 of her 4 children. The only one remaining was Percy Florence, born in 1819, who would be her only child to survive to adulthood. Mary sank into a deep depression. She wrote in her journal, "I am no longer the same. I have been so long accustomed to misery that I can no longer feel pleasure or pain." She could not write. She could not think. The brilliant, creative mind that had given life to one of literature's most famous monsters could not find a reason to keep going. And then, in 1822, the final blow fell. Percy Shelley drowned. He was sailing with a friend off the coast of Italy when a sudden storm capsized their boat. Percy could not swim. His body washed ashore 10 days later, so badly decomposed it could only be identified by the books in his pockets. Mary was 24 years old. She was a widow. She had lost her husband, 3 of her 4 children, and most of her friends. She was left alone in a foreign country with almost no money and a 4-year-old son to raise. The parallels between her life and Victor Frankenstein's were impossible to ignore. Victor had lost his mother, his brother, his friend, his wife. He had been left alone, consumed by grief and guilt, wandering the earth in search of something that could never be recovered. Mary had written that story before it happened to her, and now she was living it. But Mary Shelley's horror did not stay on the page. The questions she raised about science, ambition, and responsibility became more urgent with every passing decade. In the early 19th century, doctors and anatomists needed corpses to study. Medical schools required them for dissection and research, but there were not enough bodies. The only legal source was executed criminals, and there were not nearly enough executions to meet the demand. And so, a black market emerged. Resurrection men, body snatchers, would rob graves at night, digging up the recently dead and selling them to medical schools. It was gruesome work, but it paid well. Families began posting guards at cemeteries. Iron cages were placed over graves to prevent theft. The fear was not just of death, but of what might happen to your body after death. And then, in 1828, the horror escalated. In Edinburgh, Scotland, 2 men named William Burke and William Hare realized that digging up bodies was hard work. Why rob graves when you could simply create corpses? Over the course of a year, they murdered 16 people, mostly the poor, the drunk, the vulnerable, and sold their bodies to Dr. Robert Knox, a respected anatomist who asked no questions about where the corpses came from. When the murders were discovered, the public was horrified. Burke was hanged. His body was publicly dissected, a fitting punishment for a man who had turned human beings into commodities. Hare escaped punishment by testifying against his partner. The scandal rocked Britain. It raised questions that Mary Shelley had already asked in Frankenstein. What are the ethical limits of scientific pursuit? How far is too far? Who is responsible when ambition leads to atrocity? And the questions only grew more urgent as science advanced. By the late 19th century, doctors were experimenting with organ transplants, blood transfusions, and early forms of resuscitation. In the 20th century came cloning, genetic engineering, and artificial intelligence. Each new breakthrough brought with it Mary Shelley's warning. What do we owe our creations? Where is the line between innovation and abomination? This is the question at the heart of Frankenstein. And Mary Shelley never gives us an easy answer. Is the creature a monster? Yes, he murders innocent people. William, Justine, Henry Clerval, Elizabeth, none of them deserve to die. The creature's suffering does not justify his actions. But is Victor Frankenstein a monster? Also, yes. He creates life and then abandons it. He builds an intelligent, feeling being and then flees in horror when that being does not meet his expectations. He watches an innocent woman hanged for a crime he knows she did not commit, and he says nothing. He destroys the creature's one hope for companionship, knowing it will drive the creature to murder again. Victor's sin is not creation. It is abandonment. It is cowardice. It is his refusal to take responsibility for what he has made. The creature says it himself. I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel, whom thou drivest from joy for no misdeed. Everywhere I see bliss, from which I alone am irrevocably excluded. I was benevolent and good. Misery made me a fiend. Make me happy, and I shall again be virtuous. The creature is both victim and villain. He was made, not born. He was rejected, not embraced. And in his pain, he becomes what the world has always seen him as, a monster. This is Mary Shelley's genius. She does not ask us to choose between creator and creation. She asks us to see how they create each other, how Victor's abandonment creates the creature's rage, how the creature's violence confirms Victor's horror, how the cycle of cruelty, once started, cannot be stopped. And she asks us to see ourselves in both of them. We are all creators. We create ideas, technologies, systems. We create children. We create art. And the question Mary Shelley forces us to confront is this: what do we owe our creations? What responsibility do we have to the things we bring into the world? If we create something and then abandon it, are we not responsible for what it becomes? Frankenstein was published anonymously in 1818. It was a small print run, and though it generated some critical attention, it was not an immediate bestseller. Many reviewers were shocked by its dark themes and what they saw as its blasphemous premise, that a man could usurp God's role as creator of life. But the novel found its audience. It was read in literary circles, debated in universities, and adapted for the stage. And with each adaptation, the story began to change. In 1823, just 5 years after publication, the first theatrical adaptation premiered in London, Presumption, or The Fate of Frankenstein. The play was a sensation. It took liberties with the novel. The creature could not speak, and his murderous rage was emphasized over his philosophical suffering. But it established one crucial element. The creature had no name. He was simply called the monster or the creature, and in playbills and reviews, he was often referred to as Frankenstein. This confusion has persisted ever since. To this day, most people believe that Frankenstein is the name of the monster, not the creator. It is one of the most widespread misunderstandings in literature, and yet, in a way, it is fitting. Because the question Mary Shelley raises is, who is the real Frankenstein? The creator or the creation? The man who makes a monster or the monster he makes? In 1831, Mary Shelley published a revised edition of Frankenstein. By this time, she was famous. Percy Shelley had died, and her name was finally on the cover. But the new edition was different in significant ways. Mary made Victor more passive, more of a victim of fate. She emphasized the idea that he was compelled by forces beyond his control, that his ambition was almost predestined. The changes softened some of Victor's guilt, but they also made the story more fatalistic. Critics still debate which version is better, but both editions ensured that Frankenstein would endure. Frankenstein became a myth, in the truest sense, in 1931, when Universal Studios released its film adaptation, directed by James Whale and starring Boris Karloff as the creature. Frankenstein became one of the most successful horror films of its era. It introduced images that are now inseparable from the story. The laboratory filled with crackling electricity, the Gothic castle on a stormy night, the angry mob with torches and pitchforks. And most importantly, it created the visual icon of the creature that we still recognize today. Boris Karloff's makeup, designed by Jack Pierce, is unforgettable. The flat-topped head, the bolts in the neck, the heavy brow and sunken eyes, the lumbering walk. This was not Mary Shelley's creature, who was described as having flowing black hair and watery eyes. But it was the creature that would define the character forever. And the film made one other crucial change. The creature could not speak. In Mary Shelley's novel, the creature is eloquent. He is more well-spoken than most humans, able to quote Paradise Lost and debate philosophy. His suffering is intellectual as much as it is physical. But in the 1931 film, he is mute. He can only growl and grunt. This makes him more frightening, but it also removes his humanity. He is no longer a tragic figure who has been abandoned. He is a monster who must be destroyed. This version of the creature, mindless, violent, more animal than man, became the template for almost every adaptation that followed. From Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein to Young Frankenstein, from the Munsters to modern films, the image of Boris Karloff's creature is what people think of when they hear the name Frankenstein. But something was lost in that transformation. The tragedy, the philosophy, the question of who is truly monstrous. Mary Shelley's novel asked us to think. Hollywood asked us to scream. Both versions have value, but only one is true to Mary's vision. The questions Mary Shelley raised in 1818 have never been more relevant than they are today. We live in an age of unprecedented scientific power. We can clone animals. We can edit genes using CRISPR technology. We can create artificial intelligence that can think, learn, and create. We are on the verge of being able to bring extinct species back to life, to design our children before they are born, to merge human consciousness with machines. Every one of these advances raises the same question Victor Frankenstein faced. Just because we can, does that mean we should? When scientists first cloned a sheep, Dolly, in 1996, the world reacted with both excitement and horror. It was a miracle of science, but it also felt like crossing a line. If we could clone a sheep, could we clone a human? Should we? When CRISPR technology made it possible to edit human genes, the possibilities were staggering. We could eliminate genetic diseases before a child is born. We could enhance intelligence, strength, longevity. But we could also create inequality on a genetic level, a world where the rich can buy superior bodies for their children, while the poor are left behind. When OpenAI released ChatGPT and similar AI systems, the debate erupted again. We had created something that could think, or at least appear to think. Something that could write, reason, and create art. What responsibilities do we have to such creations? If an AI becomes conscious, do we owe it rights? If it causes harm, who is responsible? These are not hypothetical questions. They are the same questions Mary Shelley asked 200 years ago, dressed in the language of our time. Victor Frankenstein is alive and well. He works in Silicon Valley. He runs genetic engineering labs. He publishes papers on artificial intelligence and synthetic biology. And he is still, in many ways, making the same mistakes. He is still driven by ambition, by the thrill of discovery, by the desire to push boundaries. And he is still not asking the most important question: what do we owe our creations? Every generation believes it is different, that the mistakes of the past will not be repeated, that technology, this time, will be used responsibly. But Mary Shelley's warning is timeless, because the problem is not technology, it is us. Consider artificial intelligence. For years, developers have been racing to create more powerful, more capable AI systems. The goal is noble: to solve problems too complex for human minds, to cure diseases, to end poverty, to make the world better. But we are creating intelligence without fully understanding what intelligence is. We are building systems that can think, learn, and act on their own, and we are doing it faster than we can understand the consequences. What happens when an AI becomes more intelligent than its creators? What happens when it pursues its goals without regard for human values? What happens when it becomes, in effect, a new species, one that we created but cannot control? These are the questions researchers are asking now, urgently, as AI systems become more powerful. But they are asking them after the systems have already been built and deployed, not before. Victor Frankenstein asked his questions too late as well. Or consider genetic engineering. Scientists can now edit human embryos, removing genetic diseases before a child is born. It is a miraculous power, but it is also a dangerous one. What if parents want to edit their children not to remove disease, but to enhance them, to make them taller, smarter, more attractive? What if we create a world where genetic modification is available only to the wealthy, creating a biological caste system? What if we make a mistake? What if we edit a gene we think is responsible for one thing, only to discover it does something else? What if we create unintended consequences that do not appear for generations? These are not science fiction scenarios. They are real possibilities that scientists and ethicists are grappling with right now. And the debate always comes back to the same question. Just because we can, should we? Mary Shelley would say no, or rather she would say, not like this, not without thinking, not without considering consequences, not without asking what we owe our creations. But we rarely listen. Victor Frankenstein's greatest sin was not creating life. It was abandoning it. He brought a being into the world and then he ran away. He gave it consciousness, intelligence, and feeling, and then he refused to care for it. He made something that needed him, and then he rejected it. And in our modern world, we do the same thing. We create technologies and then refuse to take responsibility for what they do. We build social media platforms that amplify hatred and division, and we say it is not our fault. We just created the tool. We design algorithms that reinforce bias and inequality, and we say we did not intend it. We develop weapons and surveillance systems, and we say we are just following orders, just advancing knowledge. We create, and then we abandon. We are all Victor Frankenstein. And the creatures we create, technologies, systems, ideas, are all around us. Some of them are benevolent, some are not. And increasingly, we do not know how to control them. The question Mary Shelley asked 200 years ago is the same question we face today. What do we owe our creations? Do we owe them guidance, limits, compassion, or do we simply unleash them into the world and hope for the best? And when our creations harm people, when they spread misinformation, when they cause economic collapse, when they lead to violence, who is responsible? The creator or the creation? Mary Shelley's answer is clear. The creator is always responsible because the creation did not ask to exist. It was brought into the world by someone else's ambition, and if it becomes a monster, it is because its creator made it one. This is not a comfortable answer. It demands that we think before we act, that we consider consequences before we innovate, that we accept responsibility for what we build. But it is the only answer that can save us. We return now to where we began, to Villa Diodati in the summer of 1816, when the world was dark and cold, and a young woman dreamed of a monster. Mary Shelley was 18 years old when she wrote Frankenstein. She had already lost her mother, buried her first child, and lived a life of scandal and exile. She knew what Mary Shelley was 18 years old when she wrote Frankenstein. She had already lost her mother, buried her first child, and lived a life of scandal and exile. She knew what it meant to be abandoned. She knew what it meant to create something and watch it die. She knew what it meant to be judged by a world that did not understand her. And from that knowledge, from that pain, she created something that would outlive empires. Frankenstein is not just a horror story. It is not just a cautionary tale about science. It is a mirror. And what we see in that mirror changes with each generation. In 1818, readers saw a warning about the dangers of unchecked ambition, of man trying to usurp God's role as creator of life. In the 19th century, they saw a reflection of industrialization, of a world being transformed by machines and science faster than society could adapt. In the 20th century, they saw the horrors of eugenics, of nuclear weapons, of technologies that promised utopia but delivered destruction. And today, in the 21st century, we see ourselves. We see artificial intelligence learning to think without understanding why. We see genetic engineering that promises to cure disease, but threatens to divide humanity into genetic haves and have-nots. We see technologies that connect us and isolate us in equal measure. We see creation without responsibility, ambition without wisdom, power without accountability. We see Victor Frankenstein in the mirror, and we do not like what we see. But Mary Shelley's novel offers us more than just a warning. It offers us a path forward. Because the tragedy of Frankenstein is not that Victor created life, it is that he abandoned it. The creature did not have to become a monster. He was made one by rejection, by loneliness, by the refusal of his creator to take responsibility for him. If Victor had stayed, if he had cared for his creation, taught it, guided it, if he had looked past its appearance and seen its potential for goodness, if he had loved it as a parent loves a child, the story would have been different. And that is the lesson we must learn. Not that we should stop creating, not that we should fear progress or retreat from the future, but that we must take responsibility for what we create. We must ask not just, can we do this, but should we do this? And if we do it, what do we owe our creation? These are the questions Mary Shelley gave us. Questions born in darkness, in grief, in a summer when the sun would not shine. Questions that a teenage girl asked the world, and that the world has been trying to answer ever since. The storm that trapped Mary Shelley at Villa Diodati in 1816 eventually passed. The sun returned. The world moved on. But the storm she captured in her novel, the storm of ambition and consequence, of creation and abandonment, of our endless struggle with our own power, that storm has never ended. It rages still, in laboratories and boardrooms, in universities and tech companies, in every place where human beings push the boundaries of what is possible and forget to ask whether they should. And until we learn to ask Mary Shelley's questions, until we learn to take responsibility for what we create, the storm will continue. The creature still walks among us, not as an 8-foot monster stitched from corpses, but as every technology we build and abandon, every system we create and refuse to maintain, every idea we unleash without considering its consequences. And Victor Frankenstein still runs from his responsibility. He is the scientist who refuses to consider the ethical implications of his research, the entrepreneur who prioritizes profit over safety, the politician who passes laws without thinking about their impact, the parent who brings life into the world and then refuses to nurture it. We are all Victor Frankenstein. We are all the creature. We are all standing at the crossroads between creation and destruction, between wisdom and ambition, between responsibility and abandonment. The question is, what will we choose? Mary Shelley died in 1851 at the age of 53. She had survived the loss of most of her children, the death of her husband, poverty, scandal, and grief that would have destroyed most people. But she endured. She continued to write, to think, to create. Her son, Percy Florence, was the only one of her children to survive to adulthood. She raised him alone, fought to preserve Percy Shelley's literary legacy, and lived to see Frankenstein become one of the most famous and influential novels in English literature. She never wrote another book as powerful as Frankenstein, but she didn't need to. The monster she dreamed in the darkness of Villa Diodati was enough. It was a gift to the world, a warning and a challenge, a story that asks us, again and again, to confront what it means to be human. To create is human. To dream is human. To push boundaries and seek knowledge and strive for something greater than ourselves. All of this is human. But to abandon what we create, to refuse responsibility, to look away from the consequences of our actions, that is monstrous. Mary Shelley understood this. She lived it, and she gave us the tools to understand it ourselves. The question is whether we will listen. Before you go, I want to ask you one final question. What do you think? Who is the real monster of Frankenstein? Is it the creature, driven to murder by abandonment and rejection? Is it Victor, whose ambition and cowardice doom everyone he loves? Is it society, which cannot see past the creature's appearance to the person within? Or is it something deeper, the flaw in all of us that creates without caring, that seeks power without wisdom? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you believe these dark myths, strange histories, and forgotten truths are worth remembering, if you believe Mary Shelley's questions still matter in our world of artificial intelligence and genetic engineering, you can help us continue this work by liking this video and subscribing to the Midnight Archives. Click the bell so you never miss an episode. Share this video with someone who loves great stories or who needs to hear Mary Shelley's warning. Thank you for watching. Thank you for thinking. Thank you for caring about questions that matter. The archive is closing now. The candle burns low, but the questions Mary Shelley asked will never fade. Because as long as we create, we must also ask, what do we owe our creations? The answer to that question will determine our future. The lightning still flashes, the thunder still rolls, and somewhere in the darkness, the creature is still walking, still searching for the love it was denied. And Victor Frankenstein is still running, still fleeing from the responsibility he can never escape. The storm never ended. It is here. It is now. It is us. Welcome to the Midnight Archives.